Hi, this is Andre, and thanks for checking out Synthisophy. Synthisophy is scientifically integrating the wisdoms of history, based on fact and truth, into our present culture. Let's take a look today at Chapter 24, Our Current President. Or, more specifically, Our Current President and Neuroreality. Note that the following will be quotes from the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, by Bandy Lee, published in 2017, with a number of statements added by myself. Question to ask is, do you know this gentleman? This is Tony Schwartz, and he wrote The Art of the Deal with Donald Trump. And he asked this question: why does President Trump behave in the dangerous and seemingly self-destructive ways he does? To answer that question, here are some of Schwartz's quotes. 3 decades ago, I spent nearly a year hanging around Trump to write his first book, The Art of the Deal, and got to know him very well. I spent hundreds of hours listening to him, watching him in action, and interviewing him about his life. To me, none of what he has said or done as president comes as a surprise. Early on, I recognized that Trump's sense of self-worth is forever at risk. When he feels aggrieved, he reacts impulsively and defensively, constructing a self-justifying story that doesn't depend on facts and always directs the blame to others. To survive, I concluded from our conversations, Trump felt compelled to go to war with the world. It was a binary, zero-sum choice for him. You either dominated or you submitted. You either created and exploited fear or you succumbed to it, as he thought his older brother had. This narrow defensive outlook took hold at a very early age, and it never evolved. When I look at myself in the first grade and I look at myself now, Trump told a recent biographer, I'm basically the same. His development essentially ended in early childhood. Continued Schwartz quotes. Trump was equally clear with me that he didn't value, nor even necessarily recognize, the qualities that tend to emerge as people grow more secure, such as empathy, generosity, reflectiveness, the capacity to delay gratification, or above all, a conscience, an inner sense of right and wrong. Trump simply didn't traffic in emotions or interests in others. The life he lived was all transactional all the time. Having never expanded his emotional, intellectual, or moral universe, Trump has his story down, and he's sticking to it. A key part of that story is that facts are whatever Trump deems them to be on any given day. When he is challenged, he instinctively doubles down, even when what he has just said is demonstrably false. I saw that countless times, whether it was as trivial as exaggerating the number of floors at Trump Tower, or as consequential as telling me that his casinos were performing well when they were actually going bankrupt. His aim is never accuracy, it's domination. What Trump craves most deeply is the adulation he has found so fleeting. Trump's need for unquestioning praise and flattery also helps to explain his hostility to a democracy and to a free press, both of which thrive on open dissent. As we have seen countless times during the campaign and since the election, Trump can devolve into a survival mode on a moment's notice. Look no further than the thousands of tweets he has written attacking his perceived enemies over the past year. In neurochemical terms, when he feels threatened or thwarted, Trump moves into a fight or flight state. His amygdala is triggered. His hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activates, and his prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes us capable of rationality and reflection, shuts down. He reacts rather than reflects, and damn the consequences. That's the end of the Schwartz quotes. Here's another part of the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, titled The Narcissistic Personality. I alone can fix it. That's a quote from Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention in July of 2016. In the early 1900s, Sigmund Freud introduced narcissism as part of his psychoanalytic theory. Throughout the ensuing decades, it was refined and sometimes referred to as megalomania or severe egocentrism. By 1968, the condition had evolved into the diagnosable narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic people are out of balance in that they think very highly of themselves, while simultaneously thinking very lowly of all those whom they consider inferior, which is mostly everybody. Narcissists are emotional, dramatic, and can lack compassion and empathy, as those traits are about feeling for others. The narcissistic personality frequently appears to be a conceited, pompous braggart who dominates conversations and has a sense of entitlement. He wants to be the best of whatever is available. When he doesn't get his way, he may become annoyed or angry. Interestingly, what lies beneath this personality type is often very low self-esteem. Narcissists can't handle criticism of any kind and will belittle others or become enraged and condescending to make themselves feel better when they perceive they are being criticized. Have you ever seen that behavior in Trump's response to a White House press conference question? It's not unusual for a narcissistic personality to be blind to his own behavior because it doesn't fit his view of his perfect and dominant self. So a question asked now is the president floating in his own alternate reality? The answer is yes. Trump creates his own extreme manipulation of reality. He insists that his spokesman defend his false reality as normal. He then expects the rest of society to accept it, despite the lack of any evidence for it and much against it. This leads to what is called malignant normality. In other words, the gradual acceptance by a public inundated with toxic untruths until those untruths pass for normal. And this becomes society's neuroreality. Time magazine gave Trump an opportunity to clarify his refusal to correct his long string of falsehoods. What the March 23, 2017 interview produced instead was an astonishing revelation of his thinking. He states what he wants to be true. If his statement is proven false, he is unfazed and confidently predicts that the facts will catch up with his belief. I'm a very instinctual person, Trump said, but my instinct turns out to be right. From another part of the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, a question is asked. Is he crazy, like a fox, or just crazy? This question has surrounded Donald Trump since his campaign for president. The question is whether a person who is repetitively immoral, who cons others, lies, cheats, and manipulates to get what he wants, doesn't care whom he hurts just as long as he's gratifying himself, whether such a person's indifference to the feelings of others for personal gain is just being clever, crazy like a fox. Or are these actions a sign of something much more serious? Could they be expressions of significant mental derangement? The answer to that question is emphatically yes. To understand why, it's necessary to understand the psychological condition called sociopathy, and why sociopathy is such a severe disturbance. Caring for others and trying not to harm them is a fundamental quality of not just humans, but many mammals. Normal people, as well as normal wolves, dolphins, and elephants, appreciate when another of their species is in pain or danger and, unless fighting over territory or sexual partners, react to protect one another. Such caring and cooperation has major survival value for any species, and its clear evolutionary advantages have made these qualities basic across much of the animal kingdom. In humans, the ability to sense the feelings of others, care about one another, and try to avoid harming one another, even to the extent of placing ourselves at a disadvantage, is called empathy. It's also a reflection of the warrior ethos Homo sapiens left Africa with 70,000 years ago and became the dominant and only hominid species on the earth today. Empathy is characteristic of all people, no matter what individual emotional conflicts and issues they have, unless they are sociopaths. The failure of normal empathy is central to sociopathy, which is marked by an absence of guilt, intentional manipulation, and controlling or even sadistically harming others for personal power gratification. People with sociopathic traits have a flaw in the basic nature of human beings. Far from being clever like a fox, they are lacking an essential part of being human. This is why sociopathy is among the most severe mental disturbances and is prevalent today because of the 180 degrees of change that has taken place in society since the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago, as mentioned in chapter 20. A sociopath would not have been tolerated in the tribe prior to 10,000 years ago, but is acceptable now and becomes the most powerful man on the planet. This may be cause for concern. Children must develop ways to manage emotional distress, anxiety, confusion, disappointment, loss, fear, all while they are growing in their capacity to think and sorting out what is real and what is their imagination. We all develop systems to do this, to tolerate and control our emotions, understand and empathize with the people around us, and tell the difference between reality and wishes. But not people with early primitive emotional problems seen in sociopathy. They do not tolerate disappointments. Instead, they fly into rages and claim that the upsetting reality isn't real. They make up an alternative reality. Recall Kellyanne Conway's reference to alternative truths with regard to the crowd at the inauguration, and insist that it's true. This is the definition of a delusion. When it is told to others, it is basically a lie. As described earlier, successful sociopaths may not look very crazy, but this capacity to lose touch with reality shows up when they are stressed by criticism or disappointment. Later, when they are less stressed, they explain their loss of reality with rationalizations or simply more lies. Here's another part of the book titled, There's a Loss of Reality. Mr. Trump's insistence on the truth of matters proven to be untrue, alternative facts, is well known. His insistence has occurred both repeatedly and over a long time, even when such denial is not in his interest, and it would be better for him to acknowledge that he spoke in error. He has falsely claimed that President Obama is not an American and that he wiretapped Mr. Trump's building, that his own loss in the vote total of the general election was caused by illegal aliens, and that he had the largest inauguration crowd in history, etc., etc., etc. Together these, among many others, show a persistent loss of reality. Democracy requires respect and protection for multiple points of view, concepts that are incompatible with sociopathy. The need to be seen as superior, when coupled with a lack of empathy or remorse for harming other people, are in fact the signature characteristics of tyrants, who seek the control and destruction of all who oppose them, as well as loyalty to themselves instead of to the country they lead. Trump has been described as a bully, a narcissist, a sociopath, someone with delusions, a malignant narcissist with narcissistic personality disorder. How can someone whose neuroreality is so far from true reality that they can be elected President of the United States? Perhaps as described in Fantasyland and then expanded over the last 4 million years with the evolution of cognitive bias, to confirmation bias, to argumentative theory, and the tribal ethos, which was then stoked by the warrior ethos, because there's a significant portion of the U.S. current population with untrue neurorealities. And consider the statement earlier mentioned that Trump creates his own extreme manipulation of reality. He insists that his spokesmen defend his false reality as normal. Then he expects the rest of society to accept it, despite the lack of any evidence. This leads to what is called malignant normality. In other words, the gradual acceptance by a public inundated with toxic untruths until those untruths pass for normal. This is Orwellian. The neurorealities of Trump, as just described, are quite far from actual reality. In contrast, consider the neurorealities earlier mentioned of Einstein in his theories of relativity, 1905-1915, Charles Darwin in his theory of evolution, 1859, and in 1620, Francis Bacon's description of the scientific method and his statement of confirmation bias, as earlier mentioned in chapters 9 and 22. These are key perceptions of reality that really exist. They are true, and they are real. Let's call their perceptions neureal. In these areas, Einstein, Darwin, and Bacon are neurealists. They think neureally. Their neurorealities are examples of neurealism and the neureal. As far as Trump's perceptions of reality, as described here, his perceptions are unreal. Trump is an unrealist. He thinks unreally. His neuroreality is an example of unrealism and the unreal. And as mentioned in chapter 21, so are 40% of the current U.S. population who adamantly support Trump. As Vladimir Stalin said, they're useful idiots. As P.T. Barnum is known, there's a sucker born every minute. So a question asked now is, does truth matter? Nature knows only truth and pays no heed to alternative facts. Here are some alternative facts stated by President Trump and members of his administration regarding COVID-19 in 2020. Trump, February 24th. The coronavirus is very much under control in the USA. Kudlow and Conway, March 6th. The virus is contained, and the virus is being contained. Trump, February 26th. I think every aspect of our society should be prepared. I don't think it's going to come to that, especially with the fact that we are going down, not up. We are very substantially down, not up. Within a couple of days, it's going to be down to close to zero. And that's a pretty good job we've done. Trump, February 27. It's going to disappear. One day. It's like a miracle. It will disappear. Trump, March 2nd. We had a great meeting today with a lot of great companies, and they're going to have vaccines, I think relatively soon, and they're going to have something that makes you better, and that's going to actually take place, we think, even sooner. Note that Dr. Fauci had told him earlier that day that it would take a year to a year and a half to come up with a vaccine. Alex Azar, Secretary of Health and Human Services, March 6th. There is no testing kit shortage, nor has there ever been. Trump, March 6th. Anybody that wants a test can get a test. That's what the bottom line is. Trump, March 10th. We're prepared and we're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. Later that day in congressional testimony, Dr. Fauci said, the system is not really geared to what we need right now. What you're asking for, that is a failing. It is a failing. Let's admit it. Trump on March 16th. It's a contagious virus, but it's something we have tremendous control over. Later that day, Dr. Fauci said, the worst is yet ahead of us. It's how we respond to the challenge that's going to determine what the ultimate endpoint is going to be. Now, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 1,000,000. Here's a split video of comments made by Trump and Fauci on March 10th, 2020.
And it hit the world. And we're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it. And it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. We want to protect our shipping industry, our cruise industry, cruise ships. We want to protect our airline industry, very important. But everybody has to be vigilant and has to be careful. But be calm. It's really working out, and a lot of good things are going to happen.
We would like the country to realize that as a nation, we can't be doing the kinds of things we were doing a few months ago. That it doesn't matter if you're in a state that has no cases or one case. You have to start taking seriously what you can do now, that if and when the infections will come, and they will come, sorry to say, sad to say, they will.
As we can see, as just presented, neorealism exists on the far right. But what about the far left? Read chapter 25 and find out.